again, there's way more on this topic than we could ever hope to cover in 30 minutes. And I want to answer your questions, and I want to talk about the things that matter to you or are top of mind for you or are coming up in conversations that you're having with students. So please don't hesitate to stop me at any point. We're a small group here. Ask questions as they come up, throw them in the chat. I'll make sure to stop a lot on our slides as well and check in and see if any questions are coming up. Awesome. So just to give you a little bit of background on the population that we're talking about, international students at Duke. This is data courtesy of the International Student Center, who do a great job on collecting information about our students, our international students across campus. So we have about 3,800 graduate and professional international students and about 1,200 undergraduate. So very high percentage of our grad level students are international, close to half, and about 10-ish% of our undergraduate body are international students. Our international students come from all over the place. There's about 140 different nationalities represented on campus right now, which is just incredible to think about. The largest populations of international students, if we group by country, which sometimes can be helpful, sometimes isn't, but just as one way of looking at our population, we have groups of over 100 students from China, India, South Korea, Canada, Brazil, and Taiwan. And students from those countries make up almost 71, 72% of the international student population at Duke. So our international students are very heavy in these groups. We also have several other large populations of students from different countries in Africa: Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Peru, Mexico, Colombia, Japan, Singapore, Pakistan, the UK, Italy, Germany, and Australia. So really from all over the place, but those are some of the major groups. And one data point that I love to mention is just that every academic program at Duke has an international student enrolled in it. So basically, whatever you do, I'm sure you all know this who are on the call, you're going to be interacting in some way with international students in your work if you interact with students in your work. Next slide. Again, a little bit of context about why we wanted to have this session. So the International Student Center ran a survey this past year called the International Student Experience Survey. I believe that was what it was called. And one of the things they found that is not surprising to us in the Career Center is that thinking about their career and job search are one of their biggest sources of stress and mental load during their time at Duke. So in addition to all of the day-to-day challenges and things that our students are thinking about, career and job considerations are right there at the top. More than half of the international students who responded to the survey said that they were thinking about getting a job in the US every day or every week. So you can imagine that stress level and how much this is factoring in our international students' sense of health and well-being and what they're dealing with on a daily basis. Generally on campus, and both in our student body and our broader community, we tend to see a lot of confusion about visa regulations, terms like work authorization, employer sponsorship. So we wanted to talk a little bit about those things today, so you can also help educate the rest of our community. And then, of course, we mentioned this before, the majority of career conversations are happening outside of the Career Center. So really grateful to have you here, because we know that you are working a lot with international students, international alumni, or international community in general, and appreciate you all the support that you do. Next slide, Jared. Great. So just wanted to touch briefly on some of the key career development challenges that are specific to international students that we're at least seeing from the Career Center. And we're going to spend nearly all of our time talking about the first three on this list, but I wanted to mention a few other things as well. So of course, work authorization is the biggest challenge, the biggest barrier for most of our international students who are wanting to work in the US. Getting employer sponsorship after their work authorization runs out is a huge challenge as well, and we'll talk a lot more about that. The impact of their major academic program selection on their access to work authorization, and the importance of understanding the implications of that. And then finally, some other things that come up a lot, cultural adjustment. So, understanding working culture in the US and norms around how to apply for jobs, how to network with people, how to interview effectively. Those can be big challenges for our students who generally have really strong resumes and really great experiences, but might need some help with the, soft skills around navigating the job search process. And then job searching isn't easy for anyone, but it can be especially difficult for international students who are dealing with a host of restrictions in terms of what opportunities are available to them. They may be handling a lot of pressure and some really tight timeframes to find something if they're searching in the US. So just important to be cognizant of that. And if you're able to help students think through how to manage their time effectively, and also just check in with them and make sure that they're doing okay and connect them with support systems as needed is really important. So again, we're going to focus mainly on these first three things because those are the more technical ones and can be really confusing. So let's go ahead and get into it. So on the note of work authorization, I think it's helpful to understand the student visas that nearly all of Duke's international students are on. So there's two different visas, the F1 student visa and the J1 student visa. The vast majority of international students at Duke are on the F1 visa. However, there are several on the J1 as well, so I wanted to make some time to talk about that as well. So F1 is the most common student visa that you're going to come across, and again, the majority of our students, especially those full-time students, are going to be on the F1. F1 student visa allows different things than the J1 student visa, which is why it's important to understand the differences between these two categories. So for the F1 visa, that allows on-campus employment for students who want to work on campus, and they can work up to 20 hours during the semester in an on-campus job, and full-time during the summer and breaks, as long as they're continuously enrolled at Duke. In terms of off-campus employment, there's a couple of different things that they may have access to, which we'll get into more detail about. Curricular practical training, optional practical training, and then the OPT STEM extension. I'm sure you've heard some of these terms before, so we'll talk about those in more detail. And then J1 students are going to be less common overall. The largest group of J1 students at Duke would be undergraduate DKU students who come for a semester, usually during their junior year. They are on J1 visas. So they're going to have access to different forms of work authorization than our full-time enrolled Duke students. There's also several graduate students who are funded by different programs, like they may be Fulbright scholars, for example, or they may be teaching as a part of their program. And some of those students are going to be on a J1 visa. So it's always helpful to ask if you're having a conversation with a student to know what visa category they're on, because that really does affect the rest of the conversation. For J1 students, they can also work up to 20 hours during the semester, but they do have to get an extra authorization from Duke Visa Services in order to be able to do so. So just an extra step there. And then their off-campus employment authorization is called academic training. One quick note about the J1 visa that's important to mention is that J1 students from some countries, students and scholars, excuse me, may be subject to something that's called a 2-year home country physical presence requirement. So this is a requirement that after they complete their program here on their J1 visa, they are required to leave the US and return to their home country for 2 years before they are allowed to come back on a different visa category and work longer term in the United States or something like that. This happens a lot with students who are funded through various programs or government programs from their home country's government. The idea is that the US doesn't want to be stealing talent away or taking talent away from another country that's been funding or supporting a student's or scholar's education in the US. So something to keep in mind, because that can really affect the career conversations and opportunities that are available to students as well. So just wanted to briefly mention that. We're going to talk about work authorization, but I'm just going to pause here for 1 second and ask, does anyone have questions about the F1, J1 distinction? All good? Feel free to drop anything in the chat as you're, looking at this. I know it's not the most self-explanatory stuff in the world. Okay, so let's take a moment to focus on F1 forms of work authorization. So work authorization is what an international student is going to have access to through their visa in order to engage in different experiences, usually off campus. So for F1 students, who are the majority of international students you're going to be speaking with, they have access to 2 different forms of work authorization, CPT and OPT. So curricular practical training, or CPT, is what students are going to use most of the time to participate in an internship or practicum or other experience while they are still studying at Duke. So this is kind of while they're still enrolled. If they're trying to get a summer internship, for example, after their 2nd or 3rd year, they're usually going to be using CPT for this. An important thing to know about CPT is that it requires that internship or practicum is an integral part of the student's degree program. So Duke interprets this in a couple of ways. In order for a student on an F1 to get access to CPT, either their academic program has to require that they complete an internship in order to complete the program, or they have to enroll in a 4-credit course that requires an internship as a component of that course. So this can get really tricky. At the graduate level, a lot of grad programs have, CPT specific courses or internship requirements. At the undergraduate level, public policy is the only major that requires an internship. And so pub-pol students can fulfill that requirement for CPT since the internship's required for their major. For students in all other programs, they're going to have to enroll in a 4-credit internship course, usually during the summer, that occurs at the same time as their internship in order to be able to complete one. Right now, there's a couple of courses that fit that bill at Duke. One of them is called Writing 270, and it's a writing reflection course where students reflect on their internship experience. So that is something that students can enroll in and take 4 credit in order to be able to complete their summer internship. And they can also take that course multiple times. There's another course called Writing 271, which happens in the fall, which they might be able to enroll in as well. But just a really important point here is this notion that the internship has to be an integral part of the degree program. So they can't just sign up for any internship and apply for CPT. They also have to either have that requirement or enroll in a relevant course at Duke that confers credit in order to be able to do that. Okay, really brief note on CPT. Now, really brief note on OPT. I'm sure you've heard this term before, optional practical training. And this is generally what students are going to be using for work authorization after they graduate. So optional practical training authorizes 12 months of employment in a position that is directly related to a student's major or program. So note that we put directly related in bold. There's no hard and fast rule for how to demonstrate this, but generally speaking, the student needs to be able to describe a clear connection between what they studied and what they learned in the classroom and the job that they're going to be doing. So if there's a connection between the skills they've developed and the skills they're going to apply in their job, they should be good to go. It really helps if the student can get a letter from the employer describing the connection between their course of study or major and what they're going to be doing in the job. But just an important note there. An interesting thing about OPT is that students can apply for OPT up to 90 days before their program end date. Now, that is a specific date that is listed on their I-20 form. It might be different from graduation date. So they can apply up to three months before they're finishing their program, and they don't need a job offer at the time that they're applying for this. So if you're having conversations with students who are like, I think I want to use OPT, I think I want to work after graduating, but I don't have a job yet, I would encourage them as early as possible to go ahead and apply for OPT because it can take 3 to 5 months to process, and they can use that time to continue to search for jobs, right? They don't want to end up in a situation where you have a job offer shortly before you graduate, and then you apply for OPT, and then you have to wait another, 3 months or more in order to be able to start working. And that can sometimes risk even their access to OPT in the first place. So an important point there. So OPT is 12 months of employment and work authorization through their F1 visa. Now, the OPT STEM extension is for students who are in STEM majors. How to know whether or not a student's degree qualifies for the OPT STEM extension. There is a list put out by DHS, Department of Homeland Security, on specific STEM designated degree programs. We also have a list as well of Duke specific programs and their STEM designation. So if you have a question about it, you can always reach out to me, and we're going to publicize that information shortly. But if a student has a STEM designated major, then they may be able to extend their OPT for an additional 24 months as that initial 12-month period elapses. Now, just because a student has a STEM major doesn't mean they're automatically going to qualify. The employer is going to have to set up a training plan with them, and there's a few additional requirements in order to qualify for STEM OPT. But in general, this is a really, really powerful benefit, and many employers are going to prefer candidates who have a STEM major because in their mind, they're saying, I can hire them risk-free for 3 years and know that they're going to be, employee with my company for up to 3 years before we have to worry about sponsorship or the unpredictability of what comes next. And that's just really powerful in comparison to 1 year. So we do see lots of students be successful and find jobs who only have OPT and don't have a STEM major, but we see a much higher percentage of students who have that STEM designated major being successful in finding jobs because of the OPT STEM extension.
We have a question in the chat.
Yes, looking at that now from Julia, if a student does not have to have a job when applying for OPT, what is the requirement for when they must have a job under OPT? Yeah, so they have to have a job before they can start working. So essentially, when they apply for OPT, they're going to request a start date, which can be up to 60 days after their graduation date. So it's got to be within those 60 days. Then they're going to be trying to get an offer from an employer that matches with that start date or is after that OPT start date. If they reach that, once they reach their OPT start date, if they don't already have a job, they're going to start racking up unemployment days. And if they get 90 unemployment days, they're going to lose their status. So ideally, you would apply for OPT if you don't have a job and you would find something before your OPT start date. But if you don't, there's still going to be a bit of a grace period through some unemployment days, again, up to 90, where they can continue to look. But those are all days of unemployment that they're going to lose. So if they do find a job eventually, let's say 60 days into their unemployment days, they only have 30 days of unemployment for the rest of their OPT period. So I know that can be a little bit confusing. Let me know if that clarifies. Yes, for grad students, is OPT a valid option to extend their visa for the summer, bridge the gap if they have a position starting in the fall that will sponsor a visa? If you're asking, like, is OPT a valid option between, the undergrad and the graduate level? Yes, absolutely, as long as the employer is open to, hiring for a limited period of time. But we see a lot of students graduate, do a year of OPT, and then return to graduate school once that OPT period is over. I think that was the question, Julia, but let me know if it wasn't.
Sorry, it was confusing. I just for international graduate students who are expecting to have a position in the fall, like that starts in, say, August or September, and they're being hired, will sponsor a visa at that time, and their visa at Duke ends in May or June or whatever. There's like a couple of months there, but they know that they do have a job in the fall. I was just wondering, like, in terms of that weird gap where it's like, what do they do there? Is OPT like an option, or is that not good?
So probably not in that case. So basically the latest you can start OPT is 60 days after your program end date. So ideally the employer would be willing to push their start date to within 60 days of their program end date. I often encourage students to go, if they're not sure about what they're going to be doing, to go for that like 60 days after end date as their OPT start date. So hopefully they have that as a grace period where they're not racking up unemployment days, and that gets them closer to the fall. But if the employer would want to start them even later than that, then they would start racking up some unemployment days before their start date. But most employers are going to want a student to have access to all of their OPT so that they can, hire them for that initial time period while they go through the sponsorship process or before they make that decision. It's pretty uncommon that someone is going to get, hired directly out of their grad program and immediately be sponsored for a visa, especially because that process can be so convoluted. So most employers will want students to have as much OPT time as possible to, essentially give them a grace period to start working and to enter them into the H-1B lottery or get them, set up for whatever sort of visa sponsorship they're going to receive. Does that answer your question?
Okay, great. So basically, like, yes, you should get OPT. If you're graduating from a graduate program, you should get OPT regardless. And that will kind of, ride you into the start of your job in the fall.
Exactly. And employers love OPT because they really don't have to do anything in order to, hire a student on OPT. So they often want to start that way before they kick off the sponsorship process. Yeah.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. And then okay, and you answered my other question. Thank you.
Yep, for sure. Just drop anything else in the chat or let me know or unmute if it comes up. Jerry, can you go back to that J1 slide really quickly? So just to touch on J1 work authorization. So this is called academic training. And again, it's employment authorization for work that is directly related to the student's area of study. So they still have to show that connection between their major or academic program and the work that they're doing. Academic training can be up to 18 months or the length of the academic program, whichever is shorter. So for example, DKU undergraduate students come here for 1 semester. So they're only going to have access really to about 3 months of academic training. But a student who is here for 18 or more months can get 18 months. There is one exception, and that's PhD students can be eligible for an extension of up to 36 months, but that's for postdoctoral research. Important thing to know about academic training, generally employers are going to be much more reluctant to hire candidates on academic training versus OPT because the time period is shorter and there's less clear pathway towards longer term employment or sponsorship. But it does happen. We do see a lot of students be successful, often with internships or other shorter, time limited experiences. But it's definitely doable, and it's something that a lot of students are able to take advantage of. Looking at Melissa's question, would there be any nuances to the OPT policy answer if we were thinking of romance studies PhD graduates? Well, there might be, Melissa, but the nice thing about higher ed positions is that universities qualify for something called the cap exempt H-1B visa. And if we have time, I'm going to touch very briefly on the H-1B visa. But basically that means that universities can choose to sponsor candidates at any time of the year whenever they would like to. So if they're willing to do that at the time that the student is starting in a faculty position, they can just apply for the H-1B and don't even need to use OPT. But in terms of May to August, September, if they're planning to use OPT in their position, those same policies would apply in terms of timeline that I talked about before. But having the capped exempt H-1B makes it a lot easier for universities to hire candidates kind of whenever they're looking to do so. Okay, so just touching really briefly on the importance of majors. So we love to say this in the Career Center is your major really doesn't matter. It's your skills and experiences that make you, the candidate that you are. However, an important caveat to that is that if you're an international student, your major really does matter. So again, for all forms of work authorization on the F1 or J1 visa, the job is going to have to be related to the student's major. So it is an important conversation to have with international students who are really thinking about working in the US, making sure that they are studying something that is going to give them, the largest number of options that are desirable to them when they graduate. Again, only some majors at Duke are going to qualify for STEM OPT. Most BS and MS programs qualify. And again, there are some employers that are only going to look at candidates with STEM OPT. They may completely ignore candidates who only have OPT, but of course we see students every year who only have OPT being successful. So it really just depends. I found in my experience, a lot of students are not aware of these requirements. A lot, especially across levels, are finding out really late that their major or choice of program is limiting their career options more than they thought it would. So if you're having a career conversation with an international student, please just mention this to them. It's not about funneling them into one program or major or another, but I think it's just really important that they understand the implications of their major, the program that they're in, and what that's going to give them access to after they graduate. All right, I know we're close on time. Like I said, more than we could ever cover in half an hour, but I really wanted to briefly touch on employment-based visas and sponsorship. So work authorization is what the student's going to have access to on their student visa, so their F1 or the J1. Employer-based sponsorship or visas are when the employer takes on the student, moving from their student visa to another visa category that's more permanent or longer term to be able to work longer term in the US after their OPT or academic training expires. So the most common one is the H-1B visa. And this allows up to 6 years of employment in 2 different 3-year terms. The big challenge with the H-1B visa is it's the most accessible. It's the easiest to get because you can qualify for it if you are working in any sort of skilled worker position that's a little bit of a specialist and requires a higher education background. The problem is the US government caps the H-1B. And so there's only 85,000 available each year for the majority of companies and organizations in the US. There's way more people who want this visa. So there's an annual lottery where employers enter their employees into it to try and win an H-1B. And recent years, the selection rate has been about 20%. So each year there's about a 1 in 5 chance of getting it. This is another reason that STEM OPT is important, is that the lottery happens once a year, usually in the spring. So if a student has STEM OPT and their employer is really eager to sponsor them, they may be able to enter that lottery 3 to 4 times and really increase their chances of winning the H-1B. Whereas if they only have 1 year of OPT, they may only get 1 chance, and that's a 20% chance of getting it. So this is the most common visa. Again, higher education institutions and some nonprofits that work closely with universities have an exemption to this, so they can hire as many H-1Bs as they want. But pretty much all for-profit companies, the majority of organizations, have that cap. So that's why it's so challenging for many students to get this. There are some common alternatives that are a bit more difficult to get that students can consider, including the O1 visa, which is for extraordinary ability. There's some clear criteria for that. The L1 visa, which is for intercompany transferees. So you would have to move abroad for 1 year working for a company and then transfer to an office of that company back in the United States after that year. And then green cards are common for generally for more advanced students, PhDs, they might qualify. We have a lot of resources on our site about that. So let me know if you have questions and I can direct you to that as well. And I know we're at time, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. Please leave any last questions you have in the chat. If you have to jump, that's totally fine. Best practices for supporting our international students. Again, just ask personal questions and listen. I found our students are often frustrated about getting bounced around or not having clear information. So any support you can provide just is really meaningful to them and goes a long way. Please be a connector, connect them with me, connect them with other folks on campus who support international students. Remember, not all students are aiming to work in the US. This was very US specific, but many are hoping to return to their home country or go elsewhere. That's a conversation I'd be more than happy to have with them if that's something they're considering. So you can send them to me or anyone on our team. Make sure you ask about their visa status so you understand kind of what opportunities are going to be available to them. Encourage creative thinking and backup plans. It's really difficult time, you know, especially for international students. So having multiple options is definitely the way to go. Please provide as much information and support as you're able to as you're sitting with students. I know they really appreciate it. And then, of course, direct them onward to us and to other folks as needed. And please let me know what you're hearing and what's coming up in your conversations so that our team, you know, can better tailor resources, programs, and provide the best support possible. And one last slide. We listed a bunch of resources here. These are all easily accessible through Career Hub and through Handshake. So I won't go into too much detail, but just to say there's a lot out there. We're offering a lot of tailored programming this year, you know, for international students, and we'll continue to ramp that up. So please keep an eye out for the programs we're pushing out. Okay. I'll stay on for another minute or so if anyone has questions. I know we're already over time and everyone's got to jump. So thank you again so much for sitting with us, and take care.